Good afternoon. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 4 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format. Indeed, all of our witnesses are joining us via Zoom today, and I will be introducing all of our witnesses more formally in a minute. But on behalf of the committee, a warm welcome to all of you. We really appreciate you taking and making the time today. I'm going to start off with a few general comments. It's just to ensure that we have a smooth running of our meeting. And then I want to provide a small update to committee members about some upcoming meetings. So, general comments. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments, should be addressed through the chair. Members, please raise your hand if you wish to speak, whether participating in person or via Zoom. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best as we can, and I thank you in advance for your cooperation. Now, on C3, before we begin, for your information, committee members, the Minister will appear on Thursday, October 2nd, regarding C3. So that is next Thursday, October the 2nd. Consequently, as we have agreed, the clause-by-clause study of Bill C3 will be held on Tuesday, October 7. And we have to set a deadline for the submission of amendments to the bill. The clerk is recommending that that deadline for the submission of amendments is Friday, October the 3rd at 12 p.m. So that's to submit your amendments so that the package of amendments could be distributed 48 hours before the clause-by-clause. Is that agreed? Is that agreed? Monsieur Duceppe, ça va? Okay, merci. Okay, so consequently, based on our calendar, the next meeting with witnesses regarding the International Study Program and study permits after today would be Thursday, October 9, just so everybody's on the same page. Okay, back to why we are all here, the International Student Program and Study Permit. So pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on September 16, 2025, the committee is commencing its study of the International Student Program and Study Permits. I would like to welcome our witnesses for today's meeting. So this is for our first hour. We do have 6 witnesses. We have 3 in the first hour and another 3 in the second hour. For the Canadian Bureau for International Education, we have Larissa Bezo, President and Chief Executive Officer by video conference. For the Higher Education Strategy Associates, we have Alex Usher, who's the President, and the DS at Toronto Metropolitan University, André Coté, Executive Director. You will each have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, after which we will proceed to rounds of questions. So I invite Larissa Bezo to begin with 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this opportunity to contribute to your deliberations. I won't mince words. The impacts of IRCC's policy changes over the past 20 months are serious, far-reaching, and will be long-lasting. Annual caps were followed by plummeting approval rates, drastically increased processing times, and increased applicant requirements. We may have successfully addressed a numbers issue, but Canada is no longer competitive in attracting global talent. The International Student Program has lost sight of Canada's long-term growth, prosperity, labour market, research, and innovation objectives. The changes represent a serious overcorrection that risks further eroding Canada's international reputation. Without action, there will be continued damage inflicted on our education institutions, labour markets, economic prospects, and competitiveness. Canada needs global talent to sustain and grow our economy, to counter our aging population and declining birth rate. Canada's future prosperity and growth hinges on those who choose to study in Canada and ultimately make this country home. We need to strategically rebuild international education, not in terms of returning to the volumes of international students entering Canada before the cap, but rather better, smarter, and with purpose. ethical, sustainable, and supportive of Canada's long-term national strategy, while concurrently ensuring program integrity. We have an opportunity now to leverage the International Student Program to maximize the benefits for Canada in this key moment of nation building and geopolitical turmoil. IRCC's policy changes are crushing a sector that in 2024 contributed $38.6 billion to Canada's GDP, over 1.7% of the total. In addition, international students graduating from our institutions account for over 40% of economic class immigrants and over 1/3 of Canadian entrepreneurs. Applications to our universities and colleges are plummeting. Not surprising, given that between January and June, new study permits dropped by 70%, well in excess of IRCC's goals. These measures have devastated the system and Canada's reputation along with it. Corrosive public rhetoric alongside constrictive policy changes has accelerated sector decline, and we are even witnessing active attacks and hate crimes against international students. Canada's welcoming reputation has disappeared in political narratives and policy statements, and the sector is struggling. Since fall 2024, Canadian institutions have announced 35 site closures, 863 program suspensions, and the loss of over 10,000 jobs, with many more to come. These are not fly-by-night diploma mills. Our greatest institutions have experienced severely reduced application and acceptance volumes and have been forced to make difficult cuts. Without coordinated action to attract and retain global talent, Canada risks falling short of its economic, innovation, and geopolitical objectives, undermining key national strategies and nation-building projects. To rebuild a smarter, more resilient system, we need an ethical, sustainable, and coordinated approach that benefits all Canadians. To address these questions and more, in May 2024, CBIU hosted a multi-stakeholder national dialogue on international students with over 225 organizations represented to begin charting a path forward for the Canadian international education sector. And there were 4 key themes that emerged. First, Canada's education sector needs a period of government policy stability and predictability. Our global brand needs time to heal. The sector and students will recalibrate to current policy. However, it requires a predictable policy environment. Second, we need a new narrative about international education, both at home and abroad. Domestically, the narrative needs to focus on international education's value to Canadians and why it is important. Internationally, we must focus on the quality of our education system, preparing a global workforce, and our ethical international education practices. Third, we need a global talent strategy in support of Canada's future economic, innovation, and demographic goals. A Centre of Excellence for International Education would provide for policy innovation, research, capacity building, and strategic coordination in international education. Canada can no longer afford to risk losing global talent. And fourth, we need to be clear that this isn't solely an immigration issue. Talent development and attraction cuts across departments and needs whole of government coordination. Global affairs to align trade and diplomatic priorities. I said to define industrial policy and Canada's research and innovation agenda. ESDC to ensure alignment with labour market and human resource development. Intergovernmental affairs to ensure provincial and territorial engagement. And public safety to address security considerations. International education is a key part of Canada's strengths and an even more important part of our future. CBIE and our members look forward to working collaboratively with government, community, and industries to realize a bold, renewed vision for international education in a global knowledge economy. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Ms. Bezo. That was a little over 5 minutes, but you did an excellent job. Thank you. And it's very nice to see you, Mr. Usher. Welcome. You now have 5 minutes to speak. Muted. Mr. Usher, you're muted. There you go.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Yeah, so thanks for the invitation to appear at the committee. I thought it would be helpful to talk a little bit, when we talk about the International Student Program, we're really talking about 3 different things. And it's not always clear to me that everybody's talking about the same thing. So just for the sake of clarity here, there are student visas, right? And student visas, we've had these for, since we began handing out visas of any kind, right? I don't think it should be particularly controversial to say that if a student wants to spend their money at a Canadian institution, that they should be allowed to do so. Right? So that seems uncontroversial to me. We can talk about what the conditions are on that visa. We can talk about what the right length of stay is, what the work rights associated with it, and so forth. But if people want to buy an education here, let them buy it. The second is postgraduate work visas. We don't talk very much about these, but these are the visas that allow students to stay for a period of a few months before, after their studies. And these were not really a thing even, 20, 25 years ago, but they were a way that many countries, including the UK and Australia, who are two of our biggest competitors, used to make their institutions more attractive to international students. So if you do want to be competitive, you want our institutions to be competitive, you have to think about what that looks like, and you can't be too far away from global norms. The third one, and this is the one that I think everybody has got everyone in a tizzy over the last 5 years or so, is the link to permanent residency that Canada introduced, I believe in 2007. It was early in the Harper years. And the reason that we did that, and we were the only country to do that, to say you could go from a degree to or a certificate to a postgraduate work visa to some kind of path to permanent residency, was because 20 years ago, the number one issue among the top issues in public policy around immigration was the idea that immigrants were not integrated into the labor force fast enough. They didn't have Canadian experience, the whole story. And so the idea, again, from the Harper PMO was, hey, why don't we have a certain fraction of our immigrants have Canadian experience before they get here? Right, that was the idea, and so that was where this path to citizenship was born, and that kind of makes sense. I think that logic still makes a certain amount of sense. And look, all of this worked until the moment when it didn't. Right, a couple of years ago, we got this toxic mix of 5 things. Right, we had institutions which had not initially been considered the target of the permanent residency program, realizing they could monetize it, right? Like when this policy was adopted in 2007, people were mostly thinking about universities. It didn't occur to them that colleges would come along and monetize this policy. You had provincial governments, mainly but not exclusively conservative, who realized that if institutions could monetize the policy, then that means that Canadian governments didn't need to subsidize universities and colleges so much. This is great, right? Lots of people did that. You then had a liberal federal government, which mainly because of COVID-era inflation, thought that turning international students into de facto temporary foreign workers was a great idea, right? We upped the work permit hours from 20 hours a week to 40 hours a week. And guess what happened? From all over the world, students started flooding in because we now had by far the most generous set of conditions across those 3 programs of anyone. And, and then as soon as everyone realized things weren't going so well and we had too many students and it was affecting housing prices and all that kind of stuff, then everyone started finger pointing. This wasn't our country's finest hour, okay? We could have done better. We should have done better. What we ended up with was a federal government that barely understood what was going on, lashing out, acting alone, doing anything it could to bring numbers down with only the barest understanding of the system it was regulating. Of course, we ended up with a dog's breakfast. But I think it's a product not so much of, the policies. Yes, you can point to certain policies and certain actions like that. But look, the real cause is here. Number one, we underinvest in operational and data systems, which leaves decision makers poorly informed and the system as a whole insecure. Second, we have almost no instinct anymore for cooperative federalism. This was a clear case where governments should have been talking to one another, and they weren't. And they should have been including institutions as well. We have brutally siloed decision-making.
Mr. Usher, you're gonna have to wrap up in 30 seconds, okay?
Okay. And we have difficulty having complicated, joined-up policy discussions when issues cross policy fields because so much of our policy making involves ministers and their political staff making policy on the fly and behind closed doors. So, as you make your decisions, as we reflect on this national failure, think about how you solve those systemic issues in policymaking not just come up with how do you make the right policy. Absent really basic changes in the way we make decisions in complex policy areas, the nature of the next crisis might be different, but the basic dilemma of poor policymaking will remain.
Thank you, Mr. Usher. Okay, Mr. André Côté, s'il vous plaît.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thanks to the committee for inviting me to speak. Bonjour tout le monde. So my name is...
You're now muted. There you go.
Okay. So I am the executive director of the DAIS, which is a think tank at Toronto Metropolitan University. And so we're focused on public policy at the intersection of technology, education, and democracy. And I was a former, in a past life, senior advisor to an Ontario higher education minister. So I had some experience in government on these and related issues. So we at the DAIS have been doing a bunch of work on the international ed file over the last couple of years. We launched a project shortly after the original January 2024 announcement. There's kind of like the before Miller, the before announcement times, and the after announcement times. And what we really wanted to focus on was not just the immediate turmoil, call it, in the wake, but also how do we think about the longer term future of the system in Canada. We hosted roundtables with a whole range of players across the system, across the country, and we published a report earlier this year. And so I'll hit a few points there. Just to begin, I commend the committee firstly for where Larissa started, for just keeping this issue on the agenda, because I think frankly, there were a bunch of reforms last year, and it's sort of like a half-completed project. And so it's important that we come back to it. And I think also I commend you for the kind of systems lens you're taking, because I think that's what it is. It's a very complex system. So I think good starting points. The first point I would make would be we need to focus on fixing Canada's international education system for the future rather than assigning blame for the past. Many speakers you're probably going to hear from, have expressed great frustration and anger about the reforms last year. But like we have to be honest with ourselves. There were many were contributed to what was essentially the failure of the system in a variety of ways that the other speakers have spoken to. The federal government, sure, and the way the reforms were executed, sure, you can point to some problems. But the provinces were hugely sort of complicit, some provinces in particular. Universities and colleges themselves, many of whom have pursued really aggressive growth strategies, incented that way also. And then recruitment agents, other players. So there are many who contributed. So instead of dwelling on that, let's focus on how do we fix our energies on fixing the system to the benefit of Canada and to do right by foreign students here. That's the first point. Second, I think to get into the reforms themselves, I and we have been broadly supportive of the previous government's core reforms to reduce and cap the size of the program tied to the broader immigration levels plan targets for temporary residents, and to do some things like tightening up on postgraduate work permits, eliminating the private partnerships, which became pretty just egregious, and even dating back to my days in the Ontario government. More focus on integrity and accountability mechanisms with designated learning institutions. Some of the other aspects, someone mentioned the working hours changes, for example, smart, minor changes. That being said, I think the federal reforms overstepped into some domains that are better managed by the provinces or the institutions, or maybe not at all. And the two I would point to would be the postgraduate work permit eligibility for colleges tied to in-demand programs, where basically out of IRCC, you're sort of dictating a list of 1,000 programs. That was, someone said, a dog's breakfast. I think that's what that is. That one's been very challenging, and a real question around, is that something the federal government should be doing? The other one was changes around graduate students, including in the cap, limiting work eligibility for spouses. I think simply put, areas that IRCC is not that well equipped to intervene, that push into provincial jurisdiction, to us, better either scrapped or delegated to provinces, territories. And we have many other pieces around the policy in our report, but I'll close here. The policies themselves have not changed much since the last parliament or with this new government, but the landscape has in two really critical ways, I would say. The first is we've only really come to fully appreciate the extent of the damage to brand Canada from the crisis in terms of our reputation internationally and in terms of also what it's meant for study permit applications. So we've seen the projections for 2025, for example, not even meeting the hugely reduced targets. And even more worrying, we've seen the numbers of new study permit submissions really fall dramatically. And so Larissa made this point well. I think it requires a concerted effort to fix this, and it's across FPTs and with the post-secondary sector. We need kind of Team Canada approach here. But the flip side is, while our brand has taken a big hit, this global shift towards anti-immigration sentiment, closed borders, and in particular what's happened in the U.S. With the terrifying ICE raids, now with this $100,000
Mr. Cote, please wrap up.
Okay, the visa piece gives us a big opportunity. And I think just to leave off where some of the other speakers did, refocused efforts on international education to attract talent into a smaller but better system, but also to attract other world-class graduate, postgraduate, academic faculty into our universities, into our economy as part of the global skills strategy approach.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cote. Okay, thanks to all of you for the excellent beginning to our conversation over the next hour. We're now going to begin with our first round of questions, but what I want to remind everyone is two things. One is, for our witnesses, we have rounds where we have the first set of three questioners will have 6 minutes to answer questions. The reason it's important for you to know is because we have a lot of questions, and we're hoping that you can, with haste, respond to it. So just want to mention that. The second round is usually 5 minutes, and then I'll usually say 5 minutes or 6 minutes or 2.5, so you have an idea about how long. And then just to everyone in the room, just remind everyone, let's allow the opportunity for our witnesses to be able to respond to the questions. Okay? Okay, merci. Our first questioner will be Mr. Redkop. 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Start with Mr. Usher. In 2022, federal public servants warned the Immigration Department about a lack of housing. And there was this article that came out, and what they said to him was, quote, the Deputy Minister, among others, was warned in 2022 that housing construction had not kept up with the pace of population growth, unquote, end quote. In your 2023 report, you said, quote, there are increasing pressures from communities around the number of international students being recruited in the wake of various housing crises, end quote. Did you raise these alarm bells around housing with the government at that time?
Sorry, is that question to me?
Yes, to you, Mr. Usher.
Okay. I don't speak to the government very often. I mean, I don't work for the government of Canada. I've never had a contract with immigration. So, I write a blog. If you call that raising it, I suppose, yes, I did, but in no other way.
Okay, all right, thanks. Mr. Cote, did you see this housing shortage problem coming in 2022?
I don't know. I can't really recall with any certainty whether I did.
So basically we had a government that got advice. People could see this coming, but yet they chose to do nothing. When in 22-23, when the student population was beginning to explode, did you see any evidence that the government was talking with colleges about concerns over housing capacity?
Is that one for me?
Yes, Mr. Cote, it's for you.
I mean, so to directly answer, I did not see any evidence. I feel like, honestly, the way this unfolded was, coming out of the pandemic, you had basically 30% growth year over year, I think for two straight years. And there was this moment, I think in later 23, when it was announced that the number of international students had topped 1 million. And I think, frankly, jaws dropped. I think, honestly, there was just a bit of a lack of oversight, the growth of the system.
Yeah, okay.
And so I'm not sure if it was straight on the housing issue, but I think that, the housing was, then became an issue as we saw the pressure.
Thank you, Mr. Cote. I think you're right in that jaws dropped, and I think it was quite shocking that the government had no clue what was going on there. I'll go to Ms. Bezo. Your 2023 annual report did not mention anything about housing shortages. Did any of your member institutions raise the housing shortage issue with you?
We were certainly, as we were seeing the growth that Mr. Cote spoke about coming out of the pandemic, substantive growth year over year, we were certainly seeing some pressure start to build in certain communities. And so we saw institutions taking initiative to engage with stakeholders within their communities to look at these issues.
So did you raise this issue with the government in any way?
we were certainly having discussions with government broadly in terms of student flows and the overall direction of the program. Broadly in terms of the policy pieces. We were starting to see pressures build in some communities, and we saw that there needed to be, further conversation on these issues. However, we warned very explicitly in our submissions to IRCC in their consultations on the future direction of immigration that caps were not the best way to approach this, that we needed to engage with provinces, with the federal government and our institutions to look at a much more tailored and measured way to address some of the pressures we were starting to see build.
Okay, so interesting. So you did warn the government about this, and they chose not to act on it. And of course, eventually they had to, but and in those days they didn't. I want to talk about immigration consultants just briefly. There's a special type of immigration consultant known as a Regulated International Student Immigration Advisor, RISIA, and I think you know about those. Their purpose, of course, is to encourage international students to come to Canada. So, Ms. Bezo, do you agree that immigration consultants are partly responsible for the explosion in international students in Canada?
The role of the Regulated International Student Immigration Advisors isn't to promote Canada. Their role is to provide explicit immigration advice on a broad range of immigration matters related to students. That could be study permit related issues, that could be postgraduate work permit related issues. RISIAs are not involved in the promotion of opportunities in Canada. They are there to support students specifically as it relates to immigration advising within the framework of our Immigration, Refugee and Protection Act.
And practically how that looks at a college is that their job is to try to get as many people into the college as possible. Is that not true?
Actually, they're there to ensure that the institution is meeting its quality assurance commitments and to manage kind of integrity challenges with respect to study permit applications and other immigration related issues. They're really there to support in a very transparent and direct way.
Right, and I guess I just want to point out that you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you do receive about $4,000 for every one of these that gets trained. Is that not correct?
CBIE has a role to play in preparing international student advisors to write the entry to practice to become designated.
Right. So I noticed in your introduction, you spoke glowingly. You used the word ethics quite a number of times, but I didn't actually hear you say anything about the youth job crisis that we have in Canada, because it would seem to me that if you lose students from one source, in this case international students, there's 200,000 in the GTA alone. There's about 200,000 unemployed youth. It's approaching 20%. What are you doing to try to attract those youth to your colleges and get them trained up?
A quick response, please.
Yes, our institutions are in their day-to-day work broadly in terms of their education offerings are very much focused on aligning programming to support the evolving labor market needs in Canada and in our communities. We've certainly seen with the latest recalibrations around PGWP a further alignment to ensure that our graduates are in fact job ready. We are hearing from employers about positions that they still struggle to fill absent both domestic and international talent.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bezos, and thank you, Mr. Redekop. We now proceed with 6 minutes for Mr. Fredescatus.
Chair, thank you very much. Thank you to our witnesses. Ms. Bezo, I'll begin with you. You made a number of interesting comments in your presentation, but I was particularly taken when you said that there's a need to get away from corrosive public rhetoric. What do you mean by that?
I think over the course of these last 18 to 20 months, we have seen a considerable amount of scapegoating and blame that is directed towards international students who have chosen to come and study at our institutions. I think we've seen very divisive language that separates those students rather than taking a much more inclusive approach of wanting to welcome them and to speak about ways in which we can integrate them into our communities and into the broader Canadian society. And from our perspective, in a situation where Canada relies both on domestic and global talent to secure our future prosperity, we need to take a more inclusive approach that values the contributions of international students. They are our future builders, planners, engineers, entrepreneurs, just as our Canadian youth, and we need to find a balanced approach to engaging and nurturing their integration.
Thank you. And I know that your expertise is in the area of international students, but can I go one step further and ask you if you would extend that comment about a corrosive narrative that's out there to immigration issues and immigration policy in general?
I think we're seeing a rise in that kind of corrosive rhetoric broadly in a global sense. I just returned from a global summit in London, meeting with my peers. We are seeing these kinds of challenges given the migration trends, given the mounting pressures. I think this is a broad discussion where we need to really focus on where we're going as a country and the message that we want to send to the world in terms of us being welcome and seeing the value of our youth, all of our youth.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cote, I appreciate your presentation as well, particularly on the need to focus on the future and not dwell on the past. Clearly, there was an imbalance, to say the least, with the numbers as you and other witnesses have noted, and as this committee has understood very well. But of the various ideas that you put forward, sir, can you provide us with your key recommendation for this committee and for the government on the International Student Program?
I mean, I think for the federal government, I think there are a few places where they could roll back some aspects of what they did to where they kind of overextended. So in some of the places I talked about, like around postgraduate work permits and colleges, around graduate students. But again, broadly, I felt as though we had a demand-driven system that had just gotten was just a little bit out of control, and these types of reforms were needed to kind of pull it back in. I think to Alex's point, the collaborative federalism is huge. This is a jointly administered system with provinces and also critically also with institutions and with various other players like third-party recruiters. So it needs to be a team approach. I think the federal government needs to engage the provinces on how they're doing their part around oversight of designated learning institutions. And I think, the federal government can say, listen, if you're showing us PTs that you're stepping up to the plate there, maybe we'll be able to pull back on some of the areas that you feel are overly restrictive for you or for your institutions. And I think the Brand Canada piece is really huge. I think we have an opportunity now if we get our act together, and if we do it as kind of a Team Canada thing. And so, looking forward, looking to the future, let's work together on that as opposed to, being upset about our collective failures in the past.
Thank you very much. On the topic of cooperative federalism and federal responsibility and provincial responsibility, we haven't talked about the provinces, and I take your points that you just raised about the provinces, but tuition, it seems to me, is a key issue here. Mr. Usher, this question's for you. In a comment that you made to the ISEF Monitor, this is a online page that focuses on international students and international education policy generally. You said as follows: we're talking with respect to recent changes made by IRCC. We're talking about hundreds of program closures, and all those high-cost programs in health and trades are 100% on the table because the provincial government simply does not fund these programs at an adequate level. They've been cross-subsidized for years by international students. It's going to be a program apocalypse, one that provincial governments are completely unprepared to handle because international student fees have allowed them to stay in denial about the extent of their own underfunding over the past decade. Now, you made that comment in specific reference to the government in Ontario, but there are other provinces that it could apply to. Could you speak about the need for provincial governments to step up funding with respect to tuition? Because while colleges were involved in this, and universities obviously, but particularly colleges, I think they are getting a particularly bad rap, considering the fact that tuition was not there for them, certainly not there for them like it was a number of years ago. If you compare tuition, I should say provincial education funding to colleges and universities in the early 1990s to where it's at today, there's been a dramatic decline, and that opened the door for colleges and universities to look to international students. Could you, a quick comment on that?
30 seconds, please. Mr. Cote?
Look, it's particularly an
sorry.
issue in Ontario. It's I think about the answers. It's particularly a problem in Ontario. Ontario spends, compared to the rest of the country, about less than half per student what the rest of the country pays for college students. And that was what started the move to look for these alternative sources of funding, international students. I think there were a lot of colleges that went far, far, far beyond. Like they got cut by 25% and then grabbed another 400 or 500% with international student tuition. So yes, that does have to be. It's part of the equation.
Mr. Usher, I have to cut you off.
Yeah,
I'm very
go
sorry.
ahead.
We're at the end of extra 30 seconds, so we've gone over. But please, when you respond next, you can actually continue with your response. OK, la prochaine, c'est pour Monsieur Duceppe, 2.5 minutes.
The next round is for Mr. Duceppe. 6 minutes. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Especially, I'm the author of a motion to introduce this report, so I want to thank the witnesses, first of all. I'd also thank my colleagues who've supported the motion and decided to make this our first priority for the fall session. In Quebec, particularly for the regional universities, it's very, very important for them and for us. But unfortunately, we have quite a few problems as to the granting of these study permits. We'd like to focus on the problem, target it correctly, and find means and ways to improve the system. Madame Bizot, you represent universities outside of the Montreal area, I think, at Three Rivers, at Trois-Rivières, for example, or the one in the Ottawa area. Do you have any special approaches for those students that want to go to a Quebec university? Did you hear my question?
J'ai perdu la connexion audio, donc je n'ai pas entendu la question.
Vous êtes familier, j'imagine.
You'll adjust for my time. You're aware of the process that an international student has to complete before coming to Quebec universities?
Globalement, oui.
Well, a student that comes to, an international student arriving in Canada has to have an acceptance letter from the University of and a university in Quebec, and have the permit in hand by IRCC. So it's the IRCC that takes the last decision, if you will. But you have a role in that too, do you not?
The review of study permits, that is happening at the level of the department, with officers reviewing those files, correct?
Donc, c'est pas aux provinces ou aux
So it's not up to the university itself or the province to make a more thorough examination of the person.
Involved at the level assessing academic suitability as part of that application process. Those issues related to security, health, etc., that fall within the immigration frameworks are outside of the scope of our institutions.
Parfait, merci. Donc, advenant qu'il y a une vraie...
Thank you. So if there's a security breach for an individual, a student who contends that he's coming in to study and he does get his permit, if there's any error on the security side, would be a federal responsibility. If the federal government assists universities for security issues, it's the government. It's the federal government that's responsible. And if they allow the university to check out the security, do you think that they're acting in good faith?
Very much committed to ensuring program integrity. However, the scope of their role vis-a-vis the responsibilities of IRCC and CBSA differ quite significantly. Our institutions remain vigilant. If we become aware of issues, we have an obligation to alert the government. However, the scope of program integrity within the parameters that you've just described certainly falls outside of the purview of our institutions explicitly.
Vous avez parlé, et je pense que c'est extrêmement important.
You mentioned, and I think it was very important, you said the letter of assistance. You talked of the reputation of educational institutions in Canada. how has the image of our post-secondary structures been damaged?
And not damage the perceived quality of Canada's education system. And absent explicit narrative coming from the Government of Canada to contextualize the changes, the assumption is simply that our quality has decreased and that we are no longer interested in hosting international students. And that does a tremendous disservice to Canada when we require that global talent to secure our future prosperity.
Est-ce que vous êtes d'accord avec moi que
Would you agree with me that while I spent the summer, this summer, I worked all summer because I had to help students get their permits, their study permits. The protocol is there, but they were having great problem, and I had to try to get involved to speed up the process because French language students or French institutions were having a hard time. Apparently, there are some international crime organizations that are using them as scapegoats, if you will, or victims to get into the country. They need that. But universities need students in order to sustain programs. And to my mind, it doesn't make any sense that real, legitimate students be exposed to these delays and have to bear a lot of discrimination.
Immediate after effects of the policy changes. There is clearly work to be done in terms of that recalibration and how it is playing out at the level of study permit assessment. And we are actively engaging with IRCC to work through this such that it doesn't serve to deter genuine students from pursuing their academic studies in our institutions, both within Quebec and within the rest of the country.
30 seconds.
je veux quand même revenir sur le fait que
I'd like to come back to the issue that we want to find solutions. And currently, the most recent reforms of the government are not on the wrong track. They're on the wrong track. We can't, of course, discuss this in detail today here, but I would urge all our witnesses perhaps to send up further information in writing that would help us resolve the situation and improve it.
And now we go to our second round, and that is for 5 minutes, and it will be Mr. Ma. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is addressed to Mr. Cote. In January 2025, you published a report entitled Where to From Here, focused on the international higher education in Canada. In theme number 2, you explained that the large number of students in general, business, and other low alignment programs struggled to transition to high-demand occupations on their postgraduate work permit and often failed to receive permanent residency. If international student caps had been established earlier, would this problem have existed?
It might have existed to some extent, but I think the challenge was you had a huge increase in the number of students, and the largest share of that increase was in college programs, for example, and a huge proportion of those college programs were enrolling students in these kind of general business sort of certificate programs or other types of credentials. And there was just a very low likelihood they would have labor market success after. And so I certainly think it became a numbers game. I think also, part of the challenge on the recruitment side was, this promise was made to many of these students that this will put you on an immigration track in Canada, when the simple fact was there are not enough permanent residency slots to accommodate this huge volume of students we were letting into the country. And so I think many felt as though we kind of sold them it was a bit of a raw deal, right? We kind of led them astray.
Thank you. And as you mentioned, there were a large number of student permits that were issued. Were you or other organizations required to report on the enrollment status and ongoing enrollment and work permit that they are able to gainfully be employed?
So I mean, we're a center within a university that will have a division that will focus on international education, but a lot of that data would be, and Alex is typically the data expert, but a lot of that would be reported onto IRCC, and a lot of that data was made public, and it was the analysis of that data that started to point to some of those trends like that.
Thank you. And my following question is for Mr. Usher. You published, again, also in 2025 on the state of post-secondary education in Canada. In it, you mentioned that for both universities and colleges, business study are the largest single category of enrollments due to mainly to this being the field of choice for the international students. A few pages later, you write that at the college level, nearly 50% of all students are enrolled in business programs. Besides this statement is a chart where I see in the 2022 and 2023 academic year, there were over 90,000 international students enrolled in college business programs and close to 60,000 university business programs. In your opinion, would these numbers have been the same if the international student caps have been established earlier?
That's a good question. I don't know. Business programs are the cheapest ones for universities to put on, right? So it's not just that. One of the reasons that they require the lowest levels of language skills, frankly, from international students, and they're the cheapest to put on. So there would be a lot. I think even with caps, you would likely see a lot of people in those programs because there's a lot of incentive to build them that way. Would it be as high? Maybe not, but it'd still be high.
So would it be fair to say that these numbers, as far as you know, were uncontrolled and there were no caps, and then they were just free-flowing as the applications come through?
There were no caps because the provincial, so most of that number, those college numbers are in Ontario, okay? And the provincial government on 3 occasions between 2019 and 2024 loosened the regulations so that colleges could accept more and more students. Colleges said, you won't give us the money, let us go get it ourselves. And they did. And, the Ford government in the 905 zone was throwing gasoline on a fire when it came to permitting institutions to bring in as many students as possible, as cheaply as possible. And that meant, in many cases, putting them in business programs.
And in that scenario, were there considerations made to, 1, housing issues, 2, in terms of employment, and as well as the impact to local use in the areas?
25 seconds, please.
You'd have to ask the Ford government, but to my knowledge, no.
So what I gather is, due to these no-cap situations, institutions were allowed to admit as many as they come through without due considerations for housing, for the health care, and other aspects of having these student
Thank you,
bodies
Mr.
here.
Ma.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have 5 minutes for Mr. Zuberi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to witnesses for being here today. I'd like to start off with I believe it was Mr. Usher, who was speaking in your last point. You were speaking about cooperative federalism and that there's a siloed approach. While you complete that thought, I'd just also like you to opine or share with us your thoughts on the IRCC review that did happen around the International Students Program in 2022-2023 in consultation with provinces and territories and stakeholders. So as you answer that, complete that part of your testimony, if you can just consider what I mentioned in terms of that review, which found at the end that there were unsustainable numbers and that was undermining the program's integrity.
I'll be honest, I don't remember that review. I mean, there's been so much going on, and everybody has some. I don't really know specifically what that was. I mean, there was a.
That's fine, but maybe just to complete your thought on that point.
We don't have. I mean, I talked to a lot of provincial deputy ministers in the immediate aftermath of the January 2024 announcement by Minister Miller that he was putting caps on, and nobody could get a straight answer out of the ministry about how many spots were going to each province. They couldn't get straight answers about why the numbers didn't appear to be proportional as would be promised. They couldn't get straight answers about how fast this would be done. The decision to tell all provinces that they had to copy the Quebec system of letters of attestation, which might have been a good idea, that was done with no consultation. Provinces had to put it together on the fly in about 8 or 10 weeks. I mean, it was brutal. It's not, that's not the way you treat partners. That's not the way you treat, and it goes the other way. Provinces, my example of the Premier of Ontario spending gasoline on a fire, like you don't do that. We just don't have a way of talking about issues before they build into crises. And I don't think we have a way to talk to each other after the crises but we're bad at coordination. Everybody likes to do things on their own. They don't like to take, to share credit or to be seen to have to, be indecisive by talking to another partner. It's a corrosive way of doing politics.
I appreciate what you're saying, and I understand that you might not, as you said, be aware of all the consultations that do happen, including the one that I referred to. I want to shift gears now and go back to Mr. Cote. You mentioned that those who have come into Canada already under the social contract, that if one studies, there is a pathway to PR, essentially, are here right now, and that we now have tightened things up, understandably so. We've tightened things up, and they find themselves without that expected avenue to PR. Do you have any solutions or any suggested solutions for us to honor that social contract for those who already are in Canada, have studied under that expectation they enter into PR at some point?
Honestly, I do not have great solutions for you because the challenge is you just have this whole wave of students who came in during that boom, and the rules of the game were changed while they were here. And maybe they were towards the end of their studies. Maybe they were already post-studies on a postgraduate work permit. But they had some signals about the direction of our immigration system, and that changed pretty abruptly. And we're now operating in a system where there will be fewer spaces available. And so I think it's pretty understandable that they felt like, the rug was pulled a little bit. And I think on the international brand front, I mean, these were the types of things that we were seeing in foreign markets, like in India, for example, like people on Reddit message boards literally talking about how Canada, pulled the rug out from them.
And
these are the things that...
And that is
will linger.
Certainly. And that's a bit hard to control. Yeah. But do you think there is a level of social contract that we did have with those who came here? I have about 30 seconds left.
I do, yeah. I mean, I think these are not just dollar signs in front of us. These are human beings, and also these are people who we're hopeful that will come and can potentially become residents in Canada, can be Canadian ambassadors for Canada when they go back home. So I think that needs to be part of our...
And just yes, no for the
focus.
Others. Do you also believe this social contract is a yes, no? Feel free to unmute, or else
it would be nice to honor our commitments, but if you make stupid commitments, maybe you don't have to keep them.
Okay, thank you. That is 5 minutes. Next, we have 2.5 minutes for Monsieur Duceppe. S'il vous plaît.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thanks again, Madam Chair. Madame Bizzot, can you indicate to the committee the impact that recent reforms have had in research at the graduate studies level? Could you describe the situation?
The committee may recall that in the first year of the CAP in 2024, graduate level studies were excluded from the CAP. That being said, we saw significant declines in terms of international talent at the graduate level coming into our institutions. International talent play a very key role in our laboratories in driving a lot of the research that happens at our research-intensive institutions. And a significant portion of that talent, we were seeing declines of 25%, even greater than 25% within those graduate programs as a result of the brand damage that came from the first year of the CAP. So the impact has been very significant. And in a very competitive global environment, that is a significant risk for Canada.
Excusez-moi, j'ai pas beaucoup de temps, mais justement, cet impact-là sur vos
So
institutions.
the impact on the institutions, but what does it have as an impact on the society as a whole? This is a fundamental research issue in universities, and it will hard hit.
Generate research that benefits Canadian society or the broader global community. It's a tremendous loss, and it will take years to rebuild.
Thank you so much, Mr. Duceppe.
Merci à tous les témoins de vous être présentés aujourd'hui.
Well, I'd like to thank all the witnesses that appeared today.
And we have two more witnesses. So I'm going to ask Mr. Davies for 2.5 minutes and then Mr. Frejascatos for 2.5 minutes. Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Throughout this testimony, and the witnesses have talked about multi-level responsibility, and I can't help but thinking that after the collapse of the program and the impact it's had across the country, that it's a bit of Monday morning quarterbacking for everybody involved. Because hindsight is sort of 2020, but I'm concerned that colleges and universities over the last this summer have laid off over 10,000 people. Every university in the minister's riding is posting deficits. And while we may have been tightening up on things, Mr. Cote, would you agree that largely these layoffs are fundamentally a result of the sudden shift in the federal program?
I think it's a tough one because the growth was concentrated in certain places. So you've seen major problems at Ontario colleges because Ontario colleges were the ones who so dramatically over-indexed, and you've seen a little bit of that in other parts of the country. I think the other aspect comes back to where Alex was earlier, which was you also have the chronic underfunding of these institutions at the provincial level, constraints on domestic tuitions, and so there's a bit of a gradual ramp up in the challenge, and then this was a bit of a tipping point for certain institutions, and as much as it stinks to close campuses and to lay off staff, I also look at all this and I say we had a system that grew far too big for its britches. You can't continue to employ the same numbers of people if you're not teaching the same number of students. Okay. So I think it was a bit of a reckoning that kind of had to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Cote. I don't have much time here, but
1 minute.
As a result of, I understand and appreciate your comment here, but the impact on post-secondary institutions is across the country. Are you aware of any post-secondary colleges or universities that are on the verge of collapse in the country perhaps over the next couple of years?
Well, I mean, Ontario most recently dealt with the Laurentian University situation, which was related to a variety of other things. And they were actually, interestingly, I think, less over-indexed on the international student front. I haven't heard of examples of others that are on the verge of collapse, although I do know from just conversation with some folks in the Ontario government that there are ones that they are looking at and not obviously publicly talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Cote. Thank you, Mr. Davies. Mr. Frejascatos, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Usher, you've helped put matters into context here today. You, for example, in your initial presentation, talked about a policy put in place in 2007, a link to permanent residency, and you said colleges, quote, colleges could come along and monetize the policy as a result. Do you include within that the diploma mills, for lack of a better phrase? Would you include those types of colleges in this, those that are not reputable and were a big part of this problem?
So all of those mills, I hate that term. They were teaching public college curricula, every last one of them. So yeah, I know people like to go, like when they hate when they see the word private in front of education, they just assume that things are bad. But every single one of them, we're delivering a public sector education. Some of them are doing it better than others. We don't know because the provincial government declined to actually have any quality assessment processes for these things, which was a disaster. I mean, we could have solved a lot of problems with that. So the answer is, were public colleges, via the use of public-private partnerships, were they monetizing the system? Absolutely. That's 100% what they were doing.
I use that term for lack of a better phrase, or term rather, but the point is taken on narrative.
1 minute.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cote, you talked about the postgraduate worker program and you gave a specific recommendation on what needs to change. And it sounds like you're calling for a decentralized approach such that labor market needs in particular regions are recognized and decisions are made on that basis rather than a 30,000-foot view taken by the federal government. Do I understand your argument correctly?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that type of intervention was probably designed to respond to what Mr. Ma was talking about in terms of this like over-indexation around things like those general business programs. I think the challenge is IRCC in terms of availability of economic data to be linking to where the labor market's headed will probably be challenged in the first place. But also, I think thinking in terms of regional or provincial development. The provinces are probably better equipped to understand what are the types of in-demand fields that they want to be directing to. And so my view would be either do away with that or push it down to the provinces.
Thank you, Mr. Cote. Thank you, Mr. Frejascatos. And that concludes our first round of witnesses and testimony for the study today. I want to say huge thanks to all our witnesses. That was excellent. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your patience during this hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So now we will suspend for 5 minutes so
Thanks.
the witnesses can leave, and we will get back with the second panel. Okay, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. And good afternoon to all of our panelists. Thank you for being here today. I will be formally introducing you in a few minutes, but first I would like to make a few comments for your benefit, just to remind you of a few things. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. Before you are participating by Zoom, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. At the bottom of your screen, you could select the appropriate channel for interpretation. Actually, these comments are really for those in the room. You can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, floor, English, or French. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. I would now like to welcome our witnesses for the second panel. From Seneca Polytechnic, we have David Agnew, President. From U15 Canada, we have Robert Asselin, Chief Executive Officer. From l'Université du Québec à Trois-Rivières, we have Christian Blanchette, Présidente. You each have up to 5 minutes for opening remarks, after which we will proceed with rounds of questions. And just to remind everyone, in terms of rounds of questions, we'll be beginning with, I'll mention how many minutes we have for the question period, just so that you know how much time you have to answer questions. And as you know, the members have a lot of questions, so please be as quick and precise with your answers as possible. Thank you. So we will start off with Mr. Agnew from Seneca Polytechnic. 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for the invitation from the committee to appear before you in your review of the International Student Program. Seneca Polytechnic has campuses in Toronto, King City, Markham, and Peterborough, and has a long history in international education. In addition to academic partnerships with institutions around the world, we've had many student and faculty exchanges, done international development work, delivered corporate training overseas, and have recruited thousands of international students over the decades. I'm particularly proud of our responsible approach to geographic diversity in our recruitment, with a cap of 30% of our international student body from any one country. Seneca routinely has had students from 120 or more countries on campus. We're a comprehensive polytechnic that has programs across the disciplines, many of them subject to accreditation and quality standards set by organizations such as Transport Canada, the College of Nurses of Ontario, engineering bodies, Canadian Veterinary Medical Association, and many others. Our degrees are reviewed by the Post-Secondary Education Quality Assurance Board and other credentials by the Ontario College Quality Assurance Service. We have industry advisory committees for every program, ensuring we are responsive to labor market needs. Now, some of the leading programs that have attracted international students over the years are in healthcare, early childhood education, aviation, advanced manufacturing, information technology, and of course, business. And we're known for our work in bringing artificial intelligence technologies into our classroom services and operations. We recently launched our very first master's degree, and it is in AI. So investments in curriculum development, lab equipment, mental health services, work integrated learning, a housing office, applied research projects, tutoring, modernizing campuses, and more. These are ways we support our domestic and international students and set them up for success in their careers. Seneca, like every post-secondary institution in Canada virtually, has seen the number of overseas applicants fall since the January 24 announcement of changes to the ISP. We are also experiencing steep drops in approval rates for those who do want to come to Canada. Let me share with you some numbers. Last year, in 2024, there was a 45% decline in study permit approvals, well beyond IRCC's stated target of a 35% reduction. In the first half of this year, study permit approval rates in Ontario have fallen from 64% of applicants to 25%, of course, on a much smaller base of applicants. And for Seneca, across our international programs, the number of applications for the fall have fell more than 80% in 2 years, nearly 81,000 2 years ago to less than 15,000 this year. Now let me address the asylum seeker issue, which I know is of interest to the committee. I learned about this issue from a media story, not through any official channels. I wish I could share more light on what is behind the numbers, but I don't know any more than what I read and hear in the public domain. But from an institutional perspective, let me just say that it makes no sense for us financially or reputationally to recruit a student who we know wants to claim asylum status in Canada. We offered to the IRCC minister the last one, to work together and share data to better understand the issue. And that same offer has been extended by our National Association, Colleges and Institutes Canada. Unfortunately, so far those offers have not been taken up. We stand ready to collaborate to address this issue. But looking forward, rather than reliving the past, I'd like to offer some suggestions for the future direction of the ISP. We need much closer consultation with provinces, territories, and the post-secondary system about any proposed changes to the ISP, including to the list of programs that are eligible for PGWPs. The roller coaster of policy changes during the last 21 months or so has taken its toll on Canada's reputation, and we need more predictability for all involved. If we are to tie immigration to Canada's labour market needs, it's important to engage all the relevant players, such as the provincial and territorial governments, local and regional governments, the business community, and the higher education sector. Regional variations of in-demand skills are considerable, and a one-size-fits-all approach will disadvantage local economies.
45 seconds.
We need stability in the ISP, and to start the long and hard journey of rebuilding the trust and credibility of the Canadian education brand. We want to be partners in building a sustainable immigration system that serves the needs of the Canadian economy and society. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Agnew. Next, we have Robert Asselin from U15.
Madame la Présidente, Mesdames et Messieurs les membres du comité, je vous remercie.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to serve before you.
Canada's 15 leading research universities. Together, our institutions conduct more than 75% of all university research in Canada, enroll 70% of the country's full-time doctoral students, and generate much of the nation's innovation, from patents to private sector research contracts. Collectively, our universities are a national strategic asset, anchors of talent, research, and innovation. Les étudiants internationaux, en particulier les étudiants...
International students, particularly graduate students, are essential to the mission. They bring us skills and ideas that make Canada more innovative and productive, strengthening both our economy and communities. International graduate students represent a crucial pool of highly qualified talent. More than half of those who pursued a master's or doctorate degree in the 2000s became permanent residents of Canada within a decade. Yet, Canada ranks only 25th among OECD countries for the proportion of advanced degrees. We cannot afford to turn away the best talents.
But treating all international students the same, a one-size-fits-all approach, has created uncertainty, damaged Canada's reputation, and reduced international enrollment. At U15 universities, the share of international students has been stable at 18-20% since 2018. But for the first time in decades, we're now seeing steep declines. First-year international bachelor enrollments have dropped 19%. Graduate and doctoral programs are also seeing major reductions, particularly in engineering, computer science, health, and life sciences. These are precisely the field that underpin Canada's future economy and security. In graduate computer engineering programs, enrollment has dropped by more than 20% in a single year. This is the talent we need to build nuclear reactors, advance AI supercomputing, and strengthen our defense industrial base. Because graduate students play such a central role, such as research assistant, these declines are already eroding the capacity of Canada's research ecosystem to deliver the discoveries and innovation our society and businesses depend on. Including graduate students and study permit caps has weakened Canada's research capacity at the very moment when sovereignty and competitiveness demand the opposite. Even the speech from the throne emphasized the importance of attracting the best and brightest. We therefore recommend 3 steps. Number 1, rebuild Canada's reputation by sending a clear signal that we welcome top global talent, including timely processing of study permits. Number 2, exempt graduate students from study permit caps. And number 3, target bad actors while supporting institutions that uphold the highest standard to a distinction-based approach that recognizes excellence. In a world where ideas, talent, and technology define prosperity and security, our ability to attract and retain the brightest minds will determine our future. If we send the wrong signal now, we risk losing a generation of talent to our competitors, and with it, the innovations and industry that will shape the 21st century. If we act with urgency and clarity, however, Canada can cement its reputation as a global destination for excellence in research and discovery. This is not just about university, it's about our economy and our security. We must choose ambition. Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Merci, Monsieur Asselin. Et
Thank you, Mr. Asselin. We have Mr. Blanchet from the University of Quebec at Three Rivers at Trois-Rivières. Please go ahead.
No.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for those on the panel. International students are essential to Canadian universities and colleges, particularly in a matter of research. The entire situation that we're discussing right now, it was the same situation that we have in the regions to this issue. And a lot of universities throughout the province suffered. Now, let's see what the sharing of the responsibilities are. Provincial governments, federal governments, university governments. Each has to measure the quality of the file that the potential student presents. There are also the financial costs that the federal government is largely in charge, but the security issues has to be controlled or the responsibility of the federal government. All universities have processes and protocols in place to ensure that the documents that they verify are in fact not fraudulent. I'll give you an example of our university. In 2021, we noticed some differences in the number of requests from certain countries. Early in the semester, there was a huge flood of requests from certain countries, and we noted the admission system could be operationalized for the wrong purposes in order to detour the official rules on immigration. So I looked at this quite closely and with cooperation. Since 22, we are working with the RRCC, and we tried to discuss with them how we could validate these files the best we could before the implementation of CAPS. We also had certain costs that we would add if we see an unusual number of requests. In 21-22, we took a look at, and we added several other countries to the list. Too many requests from certain countries, and they were used to questionable purposes. So we have to have measures in place to control the arrival, and all these tightening of rules have had a detrimental effect. We want to offer our students a quality experience in education. Now, April 2025, we saw a drop in 43% rather in requests, in registration. Now, in the current semester, each Quebec universities have received quotas, and we could only fulfill 36% of the quotas from international students. It looks like the average for Quebec universities, it's about 35% of the quotas for international students. Overall, in Quebec, over the course of a year, 20% loss or reduction in registration for these students. Administrative measures put in place to accept and the arrival of these students is meeting, okay, the recruitment of international students is a competition for talent. And Canada has lost the race in 2024. And again in 2025, very negative impact on our Quebec and other universities and for the Canadian economy. It's not a question of immigration. It's the development of universities, it's the development of research in the universities, and for the future of the economy of Canada. Canada has to become a welcoming and hospitable country for these students overall. Thank you very much. Exactly 5 minutes.
So I want to thank all of you for your remarks. That was excellent. And now we begin the first round of questions. And I invite Ms. Rempel-Gardner to start for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'll direct my questions to Mr. Agnew. Mr. Agnew, from 2021 to 2024, you guys took in over 50,000 international students. That's a lot. You opened a campus a few years ago, and then you had to shutter a campus, and you attributed that to the loss of international student permits. Did the federal government give you the impression that the levels of permits that you were receiving would go on indefinitely?
No, I don't think they gave us the impression it would go on indefinitely. What we were responding to when we dedicated one of our campuses to international students was, frankly, the demand. The very high demand, as you note, for international education.
Just sorry, I don't have a lot of time. I'm sure there's demand, but there's a permitting process from the federal government, and you must have known that you were dependent on that. So why did you persist? You must have assumed that it was, or been under the assumption that these numbers would carry on forever, right?
Nothing lasts forever.
Okay. It just seems like
it was a campus that was available to us, and so because the demand, we decided to use that, put our capital to good use.
Thank you. It just seems like a pretty poor business choice to me. Did the federal government ever ask you to demonstrate that there was adequate housing for the numbers of students that you brought in the region? Just yes or no?
No.
Okay. Did the federal government ever ask you to demonstrate that there were adequate numbers of jobs in the region for those 50,000 people? Just a yes or a no?
No.
Okay. Did you ever raise any alarm bells with the federal government that, you know, there might be kids sleeping under a bridge or food bank usage? Did you ever have that conversation with the federal government on the student permitting numbers you were having?
Well, as far as I know, we did not have any students sleeping under bridges, so that wasn't. And I mean, as far as I know,
as far as you know,
we have a housing office that works very closely with our students. Most of our students stay off campus, not on campus.
So you talked about the asylum claim rates and the fact that you didn't know about this. I'm assuming you didn't talk to the federal government about this. They weren't talking to you. Just to reemphasize, that was the case.
Well, prior to it appearing in the media, that's exactly right.
Okay.
But once it appeared in the media, we started talking.
There's a lot of financial liability associated with international students who are making false asylum claims or overstaying their visas. Do you think institutions like yours should bear some responsibility or like financial liability for when that happens?
I would just remind you that we don't actually approve the permits. We assess our incoming students on the basis of their academic records.
Profit off
and
them,
their
right?
Transcripts.
You sure profit off them, though, right?
No, I don't use the word profit because we're a public institution.
So I would. I see that
any surplus that we earn goes back into our institution for the good of our students. That's what happens to our surplus.
Okay, so that's interesting that you raised that because I noted that you're number 202 on the Ontario Sunshine List. You make over $450,000 a year. You're telling me that you never talked to the federal government about adequate housing for students in your area. You never talked to them about potential asylum claims, which there's a big cost to taxpayers, and you never talked to them about youth unemployment rates. Do you think that you deserve your salary?
We did talk about the asylum claims with IRCC once we were made aware of the problem through the media that we had a problem. And as I said in my remarks, I wanted to sit down very much with the federal government to understand why this is happening I mean, I've got some good news and bad news. The good news is that rate of asylum claims has plummeted in this year. The bad news is I have no idea why it went down, just like I had no idea why it went up.
Maybe it's because, I don't know, maybe somebody on your board would have told you if you brought less people in, they might make less asylum claims. Do you think that might be an obvious factor?
That is, the numbers don't track just like you would say, actually. That's not exactly the way the numbers track.
But how would you know?
Well, because now, historically, the numbers are out.
Oh, okay.
But I mean,
okay, I'm going to go on another topic here. Earlier in testimony, one of my Liberal colleagues said that he was concerned about, quote, corrosive rhetoric and foreign students being scapegoated for things like the youth jobs crisis and high rental costs. I agree. I don't think that foreign students should bear the brunt of that. Who deserves the blame, you or the federal government?
when I look around my campus and I reflect back on the years I've spent at Seneca, international students have been disproportionately leaders of our student government. They've been representatives on our board of governors. They've contributed immensely. So no, I agree with you. I don't think we should be scapegoating international students either. But as I said before,
I need to have the Meg back now. Do you think you bear any responsibility? You brought in 50,000 students. There were asylum claims, food bank overusage, high rental rates. Do you bear any responsibility for that decision?
I'm a single institution. Our growth in the international students was, I believe, responsible and responsive to the times. As I say, any of the surpluses that we generated during that time were invested back into
I'll close with this. Every person on this panel today has said that they need more global talent to make Canada competitive. What about Canadian kids? What are you doing to make Canadian kids better? I've not heard a single academic institutions today talk about how they are skilling kids in a youth jobs crisis. What are you doing about that?
We are busting our butt to recruit Canadian kids. We've got great programs. We are trying as much as possible to direct them towards the STEM programs that the government says we need, and that I agree that we do need. So we're doing a lot to try to upskill, and reskill our Canadian kids and our Canadian workforce.
Do better.
Not just the kids. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agnew. Thank you, Ms. Rempel-Gardner. Now we will go to 6 minutes to Ms. Salmazaid.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks a lot to all our witnesses. My first few questions are for Mr. Esselin from representing the U15 Canada. Mr. Esselin, U15 institutions operate across this country. From your perspective, how has the growth of international student enrollment in Ontario been compared to the other provinces? And also, what risks has that posed for the reputation of Canada's international student program as a whole?
Thank you for the question. I can only speak for my own institutions, U15 institution. And as I said in my remarks, our business model of our institution doesn't depend on international students' inflows. Our numbers have been steady around 18 to 20%, as I said, since 2018. And I will also put on the table that what we provide essentially are pathways to academic excellence. Our institutions have the highest standards of academic excellence, and we're very proud of it.
You agree that federal concerns about Ontario's unchecked enrollment growth were legitimate, given that provinces like Quebec and British Columbia have taken stronger measures to regulate the designated learning institutions?
Again, I don't want to comment on one specific province. I want to speak on behalf of my institutions. I think we have an excellent record of bringing the best and the brightest. We're very proud of the excellence pathway we provide to students. The programs that international students compete to come in our institutions are of the highest standard. And I'll let others make judgment about the Ontario situation as a whole.
Within your institutions across Canada, you have made no comparisons about the growth of the enrollment in different provinces?
I mean, overall, we're one of the most sought institutions in Canada. People want to come in our programs, both at the graduate and undergrad level. And in some instances, it's very, very competitive to come and be accepted in places such as McGill, UBC, University of Toronto. And it's not a quantitative argument. For us, it's a qualitative one. And we're very proud of that, and we will maintain it.
Thank you. Can you speak to the impact on the U15 universities whose reputation depends on quality when provinces such as Ontario allow the private colleges or the less regulated institutions to expand enrollment rapidly without sufficient oversight over those institutions?
Again, Madam Speaker, I hesitate to go outside my jurisdiction here. I'm here to represent the leading research universities of Canada, and to say that the study permit cap has been very harmful to bring the best and the brightest. That's my message today. Thank you.
At the international best practices, like what role do you think the provinces should play in ensuring that the integrity of their designated learning institutions is protected?
Again, I think the federal parliament is concerned about federal jurisdiction, and I want to emphasize that what we are able to change, hopefully to this committee, to the recommendations of this committee, is to remove the cap on graduate students' study permits, which has been very harmful for bringing the best and the brightest to this country. So I hope that we'll keep emphasis on this, because this is the line in my testimony. I want to make sure that everyone remember. Thank you.
Okay, my next question is for Mr. Agnew from Seneca Polytechnic. Mr. Agnew, housing has been one of the most pressing challenges facing international students in Ontario. And being a member of parliament from the city of Toronto, from Seneca's perspective, how has that challenge evolved in recent years? And how have the federal government's recent reforms, such as introducing the caps and requiring stronger provincial oversights, affected the pressure on housing on the students at Seneca?
Well, I mean, there are fewer students and therefore less demand for particularly student housing, which is not, of course, single-family dwellings being built in the suburbs of Toronto or in the GTA. It's usually apartments and shared accommodation within the city. We have 2 residences on our campuses, so we've never housed the majority of our students by any stretch. Both international and domestic students have chosen to live in the community as opposed to on our campus. And so what we do to help is to have a housing office that can do homestays. You can match up people who have an empty room in their house with a student, and so on and so forth. So we do everything that we can to support our students in the search for housing.
Thank you so much, Ms. Zahid. Thank you, Mr. Agnew. Now we have 6 minutes. C'est pour vous, Monsieur Brunel-Duceppe.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Merci.
Thank you, Chair, and thank the witnesses to be with us today. I'd like to learn more about the research and reports that have been done in Quebec as to the illicit use of these processes of international student permits by organized. And I was quite shocked by the fact that we're blaming the universities for this. You're on mute. Well, when we heard about this report, we had to pay attention to it, obviously. We were somewhat surprised because, as mentioned earlier, universities have no ways, no means to verify and validate security clearances. It's the federal government that has the major responsibility for that. People who are trying to come into Canada have to be checked if they have criminal records, background check. We did cooperate, of course. We've been cooperating for 4 years to help identify individuals that might be deemed ineligible to come to Canada. And we will continue to cooperate insofar as the continues to request our cooperation. You spoke of research. You talk about the reputation of Canada and universities in the matter of research. Well, the number of reception has gone down. The number of actually granted people, the number of admissions has dropped significantly. And we've been following, of course, the rhetoric from politicians, from the media, and from one day to the next of a ministerial declaration of some sort, there's been a withdrawal of seeking this program. Because what we need is to find quality people in our universities. The process is far too heavy, far too bureaucratic, and we really have to work to reduce the delay in accepting these. I'll give you an example. PhD in Canada takes 4 years, and the programs are set that way. And usually the visas for these doctorate studies are for 3 years. So this blocks the system. It creates bottlenecks. It's a first request that we make to IRCC to make sure that the students provide a list of various programs and diplomas that are available in the institutions. And we have great difficulty in getting the hard copy proof of these graduates. So we have to look at the entire system to simplify it. Right now, there are very negative impact that people to whom we have said yes to be granted can't make it. Well, I've read quite a bit about this issue, and there's a large difference between universities, Francophone universities and Anglophone universities as to the impact have. Have you felt the same thing, same phenomenon, comparing Anglophone and Francophone universities? Well, they're different. We're looking at different pools of choice, if you will. We don't pick from the same areas, if you will. And first, they're smaller in size, and secondly, 75% of our international come from Africa, for example, Francophones, and quite different than Anglophone. You know, if we talk about the Francophony, they are very sensitive about the rhetoric that they hear coming from Canada. We'd like to come back to the question of the mix of having the foreign student as a student and or a citizen, immigration. It's a type of immigration, and we could be much more clear as to the consequences and perhaps benefits. Okay, I have a question on the impact on research. Everyone is looking for researchers that are qualified, highly competent. They all have research projects of great quality, and they want to continue to staff them. I'm a member of the University Cooperative Association, and we're looking for talent. And we have a great majority of Canadian students in our programs. Now, if we're talking about forward-facing technology, AI, nuclear engineering, that's very important because that's part of the Canadian research program, and we need international students to fill the void. Thank you, Mr. Blanchet. Thank you, Mr. Duceppe.
Next, we have 5 minutes for Mr. Menegakis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. My questions are for Mr. Agnew this afternoon. Mr. Agnew, I just want to confirm what you said earlier, at least my understanding of it. Did the federal government ever ask you to take into consideration the availability of student housing around Seneca College campuses in the Greater Toronto area, where you primarily have campuses?
No, I mean, I'd
They
be
did
very
not.
direct with you. Did the federal government ever come to me and say,
No.
do you have housing around? No, the federal government did not come to me.
Right. Did they ever ask you to take into consideration labor market impacts, particularly amongst our youth? Yes or no?
I mean, can I just step back a second? I mean, we're provincial, we're provincial organizations, right? We are actually, colleges in Ontario are actually Crown agencies. So I think the main
I understand,
connections
Mr.
are
Agnew. I just
provincial
wanted to
government.
know. I just wanted to know if the federal government ever asked you to take that into consideration. Did they ever ask you to take into consideration the impact to our healthcare system with respect to the number of international students that Seneca is accepting? Just a
Well,
yes or a no, please.
Well, we run our own healthcare service for our international
did the
students.
federal government ever ask you?
Mr. Menegakis, please allow the witness to answer.
Fine.
Mr. Agnew, please.
Yeah, no, the federal government, the same answer. The federal government tends to deal with the provincial government as opposed directly with institutions, I would think would be the answer.
Okay. I noticed that Seneca College Student Federation is a food bank. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you have the number of food bank users at Seneca College Student Federation by year over the last 5 years, Mr. Agnew?
I would have to ask the Federation. I certainly will and will provide you with that information.
Thank you. If you could undertake to do that, would be greatly appreciated. Your website also notes that students must register to pick up food. Would it be possible to provide us with a number of international student visits to the food bank by year over the last 5 years?
I mean, honestly, I don't know whether the registration system would actually ask students to identify themselves by their residence, country of origin, but I can certainly ask the SSF for that information.
You said that earlier in your testimony that you're busting your butt to help Canadians or to attract Canadians to Seneca. But we noticed that you're investing in 2 campuses in Cairo, Egypt. You're an Ontario college meant to be educating Ontarians. Why are you focusing on educating Egyptians?
We're not investing in those campuses. They're being built for us by somebody else. No capital, not 1 cent of our capital is going into those campuses. We're operating them. Why? Because, as I think is apparent to everybody in Canada, we need revenue, and this is a way of raising additional revenue, which we can then bring home to invest in our campuses for the benefit of our students in Canada. That's what we do.
Well, according to your annual report, 53% of your student body was international students. Don't you think those spots should be going to Canadian students?
We do not turn away domestic students. We try to recruit all the time in our programs. Please understand, it's a very competitive market. We're in the GTA. We've got 8 different post-secondary institutions. We've got a big recruitment team. We do a lot of marketing, which you've probably seen around the city. We are trying our very best to recruit as many domestic students as we possibly can.
Mr. Agnew, as a primary educational institution in the Greater Toronto Area, surely you must take into consideration, or should be taking into consideration, what's happening when these international students come into the city. Are you aware that some of them are living under bridges? Are you aware that they're going to food banks? Are you aware that the youth unemployment in the Greater Toronto Area is hovering around 20% at this time? Do you not feel a responsibility for that, or at least to take those issues up with IRCC when discussing things with them?
Well, I mean, these are all very serious issues, and we do our best to do what we can for the students that we have under our responsibility. We are, an institution in, a big city, so we can't solve the housing problems. What we can do, which we were doing, as unfortunately, then January 24 came along. We were planning to build a new residence to attract more students into that residence, but of course, because our student numbers are dropping now. That doesn't make economic sense. But you have to understand, and this is a pretty strong narrative across the post-secondary system. The revenue that we were raising from international students was helping our domestic students. It was cross-subsidizing programs. It was helping keep some of those programs alive. So when people talk to you about the hundreds of programs that are closing,
well,
it's because
53% of your revenue, Mr. Agnew.
Please let him finish, Mr. Menegakis.
Point d'ordre, Madame la Présidente.
Yes, point of order.
Point of order. The sound quality apparently is not good enough.
Il y a un microphone qui est allumé dans la salle et son microphone est allumé quand.
En fait, ce qu'on me dit, Madame la Présidente, de la part de
what I'm being told is that when a microphone is open here, at the same time as the microphone, the distance microphone is on, there's cross feeds on it, and it could damage their hearing. And it confounds the discussion.
Okay, merci. Thank you for clarifying that, and I do note that. Mr. Agnew, do you want to finish your sentence, and then I'll allow you to finish your sentence as well, Mr. Menegakis. Mr. Agnew, you were finishing your sentence, please.
I was just saying that, among the many hundreds of programs that have closed in the last year, some of them are closing because they've lost the cross-subsidization or even the bodies that they needed to the enrollment that they needed to sustain them. And so that's part of the role that international students have played, is helping domestic students.
Thank you. And Mr. Menegakis, you have just final 10 seconds.
Mr. Agnew, 53% of your revenue is coming from students that are not Canadians, from international students, according to your annual report. One can easily question whether the motive, your intent, is really to subsidize or assist the remaining 47%, which are Canadians. You are a Canadian educational institution.
Why would you question that?
Thank you so much, Mr. Menegakis, and thank you, Mr. Agnew. Next, we have 5 minutes for Ms. Sodi.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And first and foremost, I just wanted to thank the three of you for being here today and for taking the time out of your busy schedules to meet with us. My first set of questions, I would like to frame them around the role of provinces in immigration and in particular around the international student enrollment. My questions are to you, Mr. Agnew, and my first one is as follows. How important has the lack of provincial government funding been in influencing the rapid growth of international student enrollment over the past few years?
Well, I don't think the financial challenges of the post-secondary system, particularly in Ontario, are a mystery to anybody. And obviously, one of the responses was to try to ensure that our survival, frankly, and that coincided with a very aggressive set of immigration targets that was set by the federal government. And we were really out there co-recruiting with the federal government. I mean, there's a video that you can still find on the IRCC website that says, study, explore, work, stay. And it's an appeal to international students to come. So, that was also being pushed from that area. So it was really a two-way, kind of two-way happening there. We need more financial resources. I don't think it's any mystery. There's been a financial tuition freeze in Ontario for some time now. It's an old financial model which is being looked at by the provincial government very gratefully. But at the same time, there was very aggressive immigration targets being set. The two kind of came together at the same time.
Thank you for your answer. Moving on to my second question, do you believe that there were any early warning signs that the provincial government should have either responded to or engaged with regarding housing availability, student well-being, and or institutional capacity?
Well, as I say, I mean, I'm not sure I understand about institutional capacity because that anyway. I don't quite understand what you mean by that. But look, I'm not in government. I don't have the policy levers. I don't have the analytics. I don't have the statistics and the data to understand how early those things could be felt. I know people were talking about a housing price increase that was out of control in Toronto, for instance, and some other cities. But I think if you look at the data, that actually mostly predated the big uptick in international student populations.
Thank you once again. My next question is to Mr. Asselin. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, still getting used to French and the pronunciation of it. But I'd like to ask you, how have your institutions adapted to the recent changes in international student policies, including the cap and financial requirements?
Thank you for the question. Obviously, what I wanted to lay out today is not that our U15 universities are struggling financially as a result of this. What I wanted to lay out very clearly in front of this committee is that we're handicapping Canada's economic future by targeting graduate students the way that we have done in these changes, and it's been very harmful. And I think our institutions will be fine. We'll keep the highest standard of excellence going forward. Very proud of the role that we play in Canadian society. But the issue for this committee is really to think about immigration policy, international students, study permit cap, and how it relates to graduate students.
Thank you. And my second question to you is, in your opinion, how do you think that these reforms might have the ability to reduce exploitation risks associated with some private colleges and also unfair recruitment practices?
Thank you for the question again, but I'm afraid this is outside my wheelhouse. I'm not here to talk about colleges. I'm not an expert on colleges. I don't have a line of sight into what colleges do. So I'll leave it to others to comment on that.
Just very quickly, I know we've got 20 seconds left, but do you believe that these caps, the international student caps, will enhance Canada's global reputation as a destination for well-supported international education?
I believe it has handicapped our reputation very gravely, unfortunately, and it's obvious when my university presidents travel abroad. It's clear the message we have sent is very negative. Don't come to Canada. We don't want you here, and it's very harmful. It's going to take some time, by the way, to reestablish this, and this is why reforms are so urgent, in my opinion.
Merci. Oh, merci, Ms. Sori. Après, c'est Monsieur Brunel.
No, last speaker, Mr. Brunel. Thank you, Chair. Well, it seems that the federal government is talking about provincial policies at this point, but Mr. Blanchette, speaking of federal policy, is it not a problem, particularly when we're dealing with international students, that the federal government is putting in rules that apply holus bolus throughout the country without looking at the reality on the ground? And you're in mute. I think that in many regions of Canada, we were quite surprised. But to talk about the numbers in Quebec, in 2018, there were 314,000 foreign students in the educational, and we are at 3,018. There's not been an explosion in the population of international students. Now, in Quebec, varying region by region, if we take a look at Montreal and its suburbs, we have a number of universities. And there's a migration by international students as well as French Canadian students. They don't come from Trois-Rivières, and the university is not enrolled or registered with a lot of people from the area of Trois-Rivières. They come from outside. We have a lot of difficulty in finding housing for them, but in 2014, we increased student housing by 44%. Because we're told that in the public sphere, it's universities that are creating a housing shortage, and that's not so. I think we really have to examine that situation more closely, looking at the data, looking at what is occurring. Housing shortages exist everywhere throughout the country. Toronto in particular. Well, you have 8 seconds. Wow. Thank you to all the witnesses for having come before us, and we would like to capture all of your comments and suggestions, and we will analyze them very closely. Thank you, Mr. Duceppe.
Give 2 minutes to Mr. Davies and 2 minutes to Mr. Zuberi. Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be very brief, but I want to follow up on what my colleague pointed to today to sort of wrap this up with a little bow. Mr. Agnew, you have built a college campus in Cairo. You made reference to the need to bring revenue back to Canada. I mean, that concerns me, particularly with 53% of your student population is international students. So to me, this looks like a bit of a cash cow. You have taken an educational model and turned it into an entrepreneurial model, which I'm interested to know. Do you have a remuneration package that has performance bonuses based on revenue?
No. No, I don't. And, you know, one of the things that I've noticed as I've traveled around the world is that many countries actually encourage their institutions to export their excellent and quality education. So if you see many
I'm sorry, I don't have much time here. I'm sorry, I don't have much time here, sir. But
well, and just to clarify, we're not building the campus. I've already made that point, but we're not putting 1 cent of capital into that campus.
You made reference to the fact that that revenue does come back to Canada to fund programs in Canada, which is 53% taken in by international students. So to me, you've taken a model that of a free-flowing, open-ended access to foreign students, and you've built campuses around that flawed business model, and the consequences are now coming home to the reality that tap is turned off. So do you know whether there are any other campuses that have that high a level of international students as your institution?
Quick response, please.
Yeah, I'm not going to respond on behalf of other institutions, but you know, I'd be happy to sit down with you, Mr. Davies, and well, I'm responsible for my institution, not everybody else's. So I'd be happy to sit down with you and explain our business model and our strategic plan. So it's not a cash grab. It's trying to make sure that our domestic students have great programs and great careers. That's what we're all about.
Thank you so much, Mr. Davies. Thank you, Mr. Agnew. 2 minutes, Mr. Zuberi.
Thank you. And I'd like to stick with Mr. Agnew. Given that we've been talking a lot about domestic students, if you could just want to share with us what have you done, your institution has done to source domestic students and to promote domestic recruitment?
We have a we have many people on our domestic recruitment team. We have a large marketing budget. We work very closely with all the regional high schools that would feed into our campuses. We go to adult learning centers. We do everything we possibly can. We love the school college work program because it brings high school students onto our campuses so they can earn a high school credit and a college credit at the same time. So we work very hard because, as I said before, it's a very competitive market, Toronto. We've got lots of institutions and lots of great institutions. So we're doing our very best to make sure that we continue to recruit great domestic students.
Just want to ask an open question to all the witnesses. In terms of lessons that we can draw from international student programs in other countries, do you have suggestions on best practices that we can adopt from other countries when it comes to international student programs and recruitment?
I think it was Mr. Esselin who talked about the competition out there in international education land. What's interesting is it's no longer just the UK and Australia. There are countries throughout the world that are positioning themselves as international education hubs. I'm worried that Canada is going in the different direction. And yes, as much as we need, graduate level talent, we also need undergraduate level talent as well. So I think really we got to get back in that world. And as others have said, we have to start the long journey of rebuilding our Canada brand.
Thank you, Mr. Agnew. Thank you, Mr. Zuberi. So that concludes our second round of testimony today. I just want to say to our witnesses, thank you for the excellent testimony. Thank you for your time. And thank you especially for your meaningful contribution to our study. Thank you. And then to everyone in the room, as I mentioned, our next meeting will be on Thursday, October 2nd to study C3, and we will have the minister in to be introducing that. So if it's the will of the committee to adjourn today, yes, great. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.